Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. We are in 2025, and I am so excited to have my friend Miss Carly with me. She is from Perth, Australia, and or somewhere around there, but I'm pretty
You
sure.
nailed it.
Yes.
Yep, it's Perth.
um, but she is the most amazing person, has the most beautiful heart, and I can't wait for you guys to get to know her. She is well, I'll let you tell her, but she's really going into a realm that I think women nowadays really desperately need. So I'm really excited for her to share that with us. And I'll kind of interject my story in there as well, as any of our listeners know what I have been through in my life. And it kind of goes along with what Miss Carly is doing for other women now. So I'm so excited. Welcome to the show, Miss Carly. It's been a while in the making, that's for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, it really has. Yeah, I can't believe it's been a whole year since we first connected. So
Yeah,
it's been,
yeah,
yeah, like you said, a long time in the making. But
yeah.
2025, I feel like this is a really, really cool year to be doing this. It feels like a very inspirational and energizing year. So it's really cool that we're doing this right at the start of the year. There's
Right?
lots of really cool
Yeah.
things happening. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Um,
ma'am.
Yeah, so thank you for your introduction. So I'm Carly. I have been working in the realm of loads of different things for the last 18 years as a coach, as an energy practitioner, as a parole officer. I've been covering kind of all bases in terms of mental health, mental wellness, the criminal justice system, family domestic violence, child abuse, homelessness. God, literally, I don't think there's a domain that I haven't really covered, right? I've worked with everyone from homeless people to people that have murdered people to basically nothing shocks, surprises, or offends me anymore. And I actually put that as a challenge to a lot of people. I'm like, when people say, I'm sorry if I'm being offensive, I'm like, try your best. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I was shocked, offended, surprised by anything because I have heard it all.
Hand them your
So
resume that's like 10 pages
exactly.
long.
Exactly. So, but these days, my biggest passion is to really help people to discover the truth of who they really are, free from all the stuff that's holding them back, free from the things that they think other people want from them, whether it's their parents, their partners, their programming that they were born into, their cultural beliefs that they were born into, the systems they're born into, the country they're born into, whatever it might be. There's so many people that are feeling lost, stuck, and really unsure of who they are. And especially women and especially mums. When you come out of that other end, like women are so nurturing. And when you step into that space where you have a family and everything becomes about everybody else, I work often with a lot of women who kind of come out of that first 4 years of having a child and they have that light bulb moment of who am I anymore? Like, who am I? Who am I? Just basically that as a question. I don't even know what I find fun to do anymore. I don't know what I should be doing for myself anymore. What do I even do if I have a whole day with nothing to do? Like it's such a foreign concept. And so with that comes all this accumulation of baggage and trauma and all this stuff that we're lugging around. I kind of see it like energetic suitcases, right? Like we're carrying around these burdens, these loads, these suitcases, these backpacks that just keep filling up full of all these resentments, all these niggles, all these things that people say to us or do to us that cause us some kind of pain that don't get resolved because we're so busy and don't have time to resolve it. And then before you know it, you're completely bogged down with all this stuff that you're carrying and you don't know what to do about it. But all you know is that you feel miserable, lost, stuck, unhappy, and you feel guilty for feeling any of those things
Yeah.
because you've got kids that you love, and you've got the white picket fence, and you've got a good job, and XYZ, all these things that society tells you that should make you happy, right? So people get into this space where they just don't feel right and they don't know why. And that's where I come in. I really, really, my biggest passion is to help people figure out the truth of who they are, their actual, true, authentic self, free from all that stuff that's holding them back. And then from that space, figure out what kind of life they actually want to be living, because it's often not the life that they are living. So it's quite an interesting space to be in.
I know when we had talked over a year ago, you really challenged some things in me, talking about some of those things. Because I was like, I went through all of those years, I always say a shell of a person, because I didn't know who I was, having three kids and going through abusive relationship after abusive relationship, which makes me excited for what you are in your endeavor for 2025. Because, like I said before we started, I wish I would have had somebody like you, another woman who understood, who was like, this is how we get through it. Um,
Mm.
but I'm super excited that, the women nowadays that are going through DV, or whatever their issues are personally, um that you're going to be there, that you're going to be able to help them and encourage them. So I would love for you to tell everyone what we kind of talked about, what your endeavor is for 2020.
Mm. Sure. There is, I don't know what it's like in countries outside of Australia at the moment. I think it might be similar in the UK at the moment, but over here there's been quite a lot of changes in legislation. So at the moment, I'm still working in the criminal justice system, but I'm literally just about to leave this month. And in 2017, there were changes in family violence legislation specifically. Then there were more changes in 2020, and there's more changes again in 2024. That has meant a bunch of different things. Um, One of the things that I'm noticing is that there's campaigns out there like billboards and adverts in between shows on TV where they're talking about coercive control, which is really, I think that's really, really good because we're stepping away from the term family violence. Like I've spent many, many years now working with perpetrators of family violence. And a lot of the time, what they'll say is, or when I'm speaking to victim survivors of family violence, they'll say, but he doesn't hit me. And I say he, this can happen in female-female relationships, male-male relationships, but the overwhelming majority of statistics are men against women. And yes, it can be both against each other. There's a lot of backlash when it comes to men feeling like they're being wronged by the amount of stuff that's being talked about when it comes to men being violent towards women. I completely understand where they're coming from, but the stats are really, really clear on that. Um, when we keep talking about it being violence, people just hear the word violence and they think, but I'm not being hit. I was in four pretty long term, very abusive relationships where I was never hit. And if you I'll send you a link to this. There's a model of a wheel of violence, power and control wheel. It's called by Duluth, which was Duluth, Minnesota. They did a lot of research around this, where they have this wheel of power control wheel, and physical and sexual violence is just a small part of it. All the other things that make up that in terms of abuse are really significant. Financial abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, gaslighting, love bombing. There's so many different things that go into it. And so I think it's really, really good that people are talking about coercive control instead of family violence, because there's so much that happens when it comes to coercive control. And, if you're a woman or a man who's feeling like a shell of their former selves because of your relationship, that is a massive red flag. People are talking about red flags a lot too, right? So you've got red flags, yellow flags, green flags. Green flags are like the green lights, go full steam ahead.
Mm,
That's a healthy
yeah.
relationship. Yellow flags are the things that they're a bit iffy, but they can be worked on. And red flags are like a big full stop, don't go anywhere near it. And so I spent such a long time in these abusive relationships and I didn't even really know it, even though I was being trained in domestic violence. I started work as a probation officer in London in 2007. And around 2008, I got trained in domestic abuse and I saw the power and control wheel for the first time. And I literally had this awareness where I looked at that wheel and I recognized that I was in that kind of relationship. And I was really shocked. And that was a really long time ago. And I was in that relationship for another few years. And then every next relationship seemed like an upgrade on the last one, but they were still abusive. And so when you eventually get to the point where you realize how low your self-esteem and self-worth and self-love is, and it may not be obvious to you, it wasn't to me because I had a bunch of amazing friends. My family upbringing was really solid. My parents love me. Like I've got amazing siblings. I've always had a really good career. Like low self-worth and self-esteem and low self-love definitely wasn't obvious to me. But I got to this place where I'm like, I'm attracting all these guys into my life who I allowed to abuse me in some way.
Hmm.
And I when I hit 38 after another failed relationship, which completely broke my heart, I really had to take stock of why this kept happening. And I knew it was something in me. I kept attracting these people into my life. I don't blame them for what they did because I let it happen. And I kept letting it happen for years, over and over and over again. And I really had to look at what was in me that allowed that to happen. And so, in the world of domestic abuse, family violence, what I've seen in my career is that there are mandated programs for perpetrators of family violence when they're in this system, when they've already been arrested and convicted, or when they're going through the court system and want to voluntarily engage in a men's behaviour change program to look good for court before they get convicted. And then for women or for the people that are fleeing domestic violence, there's refuges and there's crisis centres. But what I don't see enough of is the education in between,
Yeah.
the education out there, which is now starting to happen with these billboards and adverts around coercive control. More and more and more of that kind of stuff needs to happen. And it needs to happen with kids at an early age so that they really understand what a healthy relationship looks like, what consent looks like, how people should speak to you, like what respect really means, what consent really means. Um, and I see so many kids being raised in abusive households that for them it's totally normalized. The amount of people that I've interviewed who, I see what they've done and what they've been convicted of, and then I hear their background story and the way that they were raised, and I'm like, no one's ever taught them to have respect towards people in general, let alone women. And so that stuff comes out later on, and they end up being a broken person, getting together with a broken person that just they end up triggering the hell out of each other, and then they have 10 kids together and raise them to be the same. So my biggest passion right now is to really just get into that space of educating people to make change and have that kind of ripple effect where they realize, oh, okay, I'm feeling this kind of way. This is the background as to why I'm feeling this kind of way. And then confronting the fact that making changes are really, really hard. This is not an easy journey. And it takes a really long time. And it takes a lot of continually checking in with yourself to keep yourself in check. Like I still have my ex's voice in my head when I cook dinner, when I hang up the washing, when I put the bins out, you're fucking it up, you're doing it wrong, and that was years and years and years ago that I was in that relationship. But so this just keeps taking time, and it's just a gradual process of doing the right thing by yourself and surrounding yourself with the right people too, with the right coaches, with the right mentors, with the right psychologists, with the right friends, and declustering the people in your life who are not your cheerleaders, who just keep reinforcing disrespect towards you, not supporting your goals, not supporting the fact that you're setting boundaries. Boundaries is a really important one, right? Like I coach a lot of women who've never ever had any boundaries. They're people pleasers.
Hmm.
For them, that's a good thing. A lot of the women that I work with, and I was the same. I love helping people. So what happened as a result of that was that I would dive in and help people and then completely ignore my own needs to my own detriment. And then when I started realizing that I actually had to set boundaries, people started thinking I was a bitch. People who meet me now um, don't think that. They just think, oh, that's who Carly is. But when you first start setting those boundaries, people are really going to start arcing up about it.
Yeah.
And if they respect you enough and they love you enough, then they'll listen. And if
I
they
think,
don't, maybe
yeah,
they need to be decluttered.
th I think this is how we connected with, we have such a similar story. going through the years and going through numerous relationships and being a shell of a person. And I mean, everything you just said was my life, so I think that's why we had such a strong connection when we first talked, was because our stories are so similar. But when I look at the world around us, there's so many women who could say the same thing.
Mhm.
So I'm very grateful that you are out there wanting to make a difference, but also educate. And I think education is very important, especially to kids. I have
Yeah.
another school counselor who we have on once a month, and he talks about the kids that he, not specifically about them, but the things that he uses to try and help them, and it's so important for our children to know that there's a different way of living than what they're in if it is a violent situation or an abusive situation or anything like that. So I know you are going to make a fabulous impact. And I say that wholeheartedly because I know where your heart is, and I know when you set out to do something, you do it. So I'm pretty thrilled to see you at the end of this year, the many women that you have touched. I mean, you've already made an impact on me, and I can't imagine, the other people you've already made an impact on as well. So
Thank you. Thank you. I
that's
think it's
really
going to
amazing.
take it's going to be a big ripple effect, and it's going to
Mhm.
take a lot of us who are kind of in silos at the moment who need to bandy together and just keep putting that message out there. And I think there's a backlash to that as well, right? Like there's a lot of guys thinking that there's just this massive feminist driven
Yeah.
movement. And I don't necessarily consider myself a feminist. Like some of the stuff that I talk about might be about that. And I don't talk about things like the patriarchy. Like there are a lot of very feminist women who are talking about the patriarchy a lot. And I don't discredit what they're doing at all. But I think sometimes the danger of that is that it creates even more of a backlash. Like there is now the opposing um, streams of the internet and the dark web and stuff, where it's like this big movement that's then the dark going against that light. And it's kind of a scary time to be doing this kind of stuff because it really wasn't that long ago. Like there's a really, really good book. All your readers and all your listeners need to read this. It's called Sexy But Psycho by Dr. Jessica Hill. Sorry, Dr. Jessica Taylor. I think she's based in the UK. It's a very angry making book. It talks a lot about the patriarchy, but there's so much amazing information in there. She's a psychologist. Um, that talks about the fact that it really wasn't that long ago that women were legally men's property, and then when we weren't legally men's property anymore, we were classed as witches and burned at the stake. And then when legally we weren't allowed to do that anymore, then we were regarded as hysterical if we were being too independent and really easily locked into psych wards. And actually, that's still happening now. So it's pretty easy for a woman to feel postnatal depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
whatever it might be, go to the doctor, get drugged up on whatever drugs the psychiatrist or psychologist decides
Yeah.
to give them, and just get labeled as being hysterical when a guy would go to the same doctor for the same thing and not be labeled as that. So there's there's so many different streams of this movement happening,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that we're fighting against. But there's also like there's amazing women out there, and there's also amazing guys out there who are vouching for this kind of stuff as well, who are very anti disrespect of women or disrespect of people in general. Like I like to bring it back to don't be disrespectful of anybody. Treat everyone with love, kindness, and respect, no matter what they're treating you like.
Right.
It doesn't have to be men respecting women or women respecting men. Just treat everyone like they're a person. And
Yeah.
so it just really, really needs to come back to that.
I
But
think
yeah,
you're correct.
there's so much that's coming this year.
Yeah. You're correct though. There is like this. I'm not a feminist by any means, but I do believe that, you know, there is a big divide. But I'm a person who also believes that men have God made men for a specific reason and God made women for a specific reason. Which, people disagree on that. I'm just partial to that thinking. Um, but I do agree that, there we had some people had to be, even I do have to be very careful how I present information because I don't want to alienate male genders and I don't want to alienate female. But
Mm.
there has to be, in some cases, like family violence, abuse, um, there has to be that information that says,
Mm.
okay, unfortunately, this is what the statistics say. So we need to work on this.
Yeah.
We're not alienating you, but there are bad men out there who do this sort of thing. And if
And
you are,
it's also knowing that there's so much that's underreported, right? There's so much just family violence in general that's underreported, and
yeah,
especially men not being willing to report females perpetrating violence against them.
right,
And so they'll say, "Oh, yeah, but it was both of us," and I'll say, "Well, have you reported it to the police?" And they'll say, "Oh, no, no, no." I'm like, "Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Because
it
they
is.
feel like they won't be taken seriously." And I understand all the reasons why people don't report violence as well, especially like men and women. Doesn't matter who they
Yeah,
are, but I mean, there's the stats are ridiculous at the moment, and that's with a massive amount being underreported. So yeah, it's growing, and it especially grew during COVID. I mean, there was here in Perth, there was a 40% increase in domestic violence. There was a 40% decrease in drug use because people couldn't get it. But what that meant was people locked in their homes, drinking more alcohol.
right.
And lots of people locked in their homes with very, very unsafe people, drinking more alcohol, having much more violent acts happening, and a 40% increase in domestic violence, which was just awful,
And
really
not
awful.
to get off on a tangent, but it didn't help that all these places that deliver food started delivering alcohol because of COVID. I mean,
Yeah,
that did not help the situation any. But just
yeah,
as a caveat, I am not one to bash either side, but it is a problem. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about men are bad and that is not even a conversation.
no,
We're
no. I know
specifically
some
talking about,
amazing,
yeah,
amazing, amazing guys, and who I absolutely love to bits. There's some, and because I hear all the time, oh, just all men are rubbish, or and it's such. I hear all these generalizations. All men are rubbish. All women are crazy. Neither of those are true.
right,
I would question both of those people on
right,
what their limiting beliefs are,
right,
because I know some incredible women and incredible men who are making massive, massive changes in the system. And we're all just one person at the end of the day.
right,
But if all of us one people get together
yeah,
and team up and have a ripple effect, then we need to get this education out, mainly to the kids and to the parents, and to we're raising all these little
yeah,
humans to hopefully the next generation is going to be different to what our generation has been,
right.
because we really need to start sorting this stuff out.
Yeah. And I guess I would encourage at the end of the day, no matter what, if you are being abused, report it. Because unfortunately, in society, they don't really do anything about it unless you voice it. And that
Yeah.
goes for both sides. I mean, if you're a man being abused by a woman, report it,
Mm,
especially physically. But
yeah.
if it's mentally and emotionally, that still needs to be taken care of. You still need to seek help
Mm.
for that.
One
Um,
of the issues, and so there's seeking help, and then there's reporting, right? And there's a lot of people that don't report because it makes it more unsafe to report. So if you imagine a family unit who's still living in the same house, and maybe part of the abuse has been financial control. So maybe he's the only one working, he's the only one controlling all the money, controlling the money that she gets for food,
Right.
for the kids, all that kind of stuff. And there's kids at home, and she's got no kind of escape plan. If she was to report the abuse, that makes it a really tricky, difficult thing for her. And actually, the time that you leave an abusive relationship, it's a really, really risky time. It's the most likely time that you will be killed. So people need to know that as well. So there's so much that needs to go into safety planning, and there's so many different support services out there, and it's also really hard to know who to trust
Right.
because a lot of people don't want to speak to, I don't know what it's called where you are, but we have the Department for Child Protection and Family Services here. And, you know, a lot of people think that if they go and speak to them, that their kids will just be taken off them. But actually, Child Protection really want the family unit to stay together as much as possible. You've got the added complication of criminal court versus family court, where family court want as much as possible for both parents to be able to see the kids, which is not necessarily what criminal court
Yeah.
wants if either parent is really dangerous. So there's the course that I have coming out is really aimed at educating people on all these different factors so that they can make an informed decision based on whatever location they're in, because it's really important to be able to speak to people who will be your cheerleaders. Some
Mhm.
people don't have any family or friends that they can trust with this kind of thing because they also might be colluding with the person that's abusing them. So it's really about finding people who can help you. And it might be a really, really slow process of just getting yourself armed with education. There's a lot of people that will use drop-in services or refuges or crisis numbers and call once and then maybe call for 5 minutes and then maybe call next week for 10 minutes and just build a bit of rapport and a bit of relationship until they're ready to say, okay, I'm kind of ready to start looking at implementing what you're telling me that I should implement. And it's a very, very slow process, but it's one that needs to start at some point.
It does. It does. And I think in America, from what I've heard, the family courts are so overloaded, decisions are not made really. I don't know. I'm not gonna say this from experience, obviously, but from what I've heard. They're not always the
And
best
I think
decisions
it's the
by the
same
judges.
in
Yeah,
every single country. I'd love for someone to give me an idea of a country where family courts aren't overloaded, but
right.
from everything that I know, they definitely are.
And just goes back to in the day and age we are in right now. That's why what you're doing is so crucial, to help however we can to get the word out there, to know that there are people there who can help, who will
Mm,
listen, who will guide you to a person or a place or a department that will help you. So I
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
it's so so important, and I appreciate you so
Mm.
much for taking that task on. Although you're in Australia, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, people all over the world will hear this podcast, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
course will be online. So
Yeah, my courses are available to everyone all over the
right,
world.
right,
And so I've got there's a couple of different courses I've got coming up at the moment. There's and loads of freebies that I'm going to send you so that you can send out to your audience. So
well,
I've got a free 5 day Love Lab challenge that's starting on the 20th of January for 5 days. So there'll be three live group coaching calls, which will be 8 a.m. on the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that's 8 a.m. Perth, Western Australia time. But if I get enough people in different countries, say in America, then I will also look at doing an extra time that will suit that kind of time of day. Obviously, there's different time zones in America as
yeah,
well. So I kind of have to
yeah,
look at, I mean, sometimes it's just my bedtime. I'm not going to be able to do it.
yeah.
But the calls are going to be recorded. People are more than welcome to send in, like pre-send in questions that they want me to answer as well. And I'll be very, very active in that group during the time. So I can do like sporadic video calls and that kind of thing. So that's a 5 day free challenge. The aim of that challenge is to really look at transforming your relationship with yourself and then as a byproduct with other people. There's a lot of self-love stuff in there, looking at your needs, values, beliefs. There's lots of little quizzes and worksheets. It can take it's kind of like like a short kind of entry into my next program. So it will give you a bit of a taster as to how I roll. Um, and then leading into that on Valentine's Day, I'll be launching a 3-month coaching container called Project Self-Worth. Now, this is a really big passion project of mine. I've launched other coaching programs before, but when I didn't realize how much of a passion project this was until my coach asked me, why do you want to do this course? And I just burst out crying. And I was like, wow, okay. So just like we were talking at the start of this call, this is the course that I wish I had when I was in those abusive relationships. I've put this together based on all my experience in my job, all my experience as a coach, all my tertiary education, my experience as an energy healer, life experience in all my relationships, to kind of condense it into one massive program. It's self-paced modules. There's loads and loads of information in there, but there's weekly live group coaching calls for 12 weeks. At the moment, there's 6 p.m. every Wednesday, Perth time. But like I said, if I get a lot of people in America, then I might do like 2 or 3 calls a week where people can kind of fit in at different times of the week, and they're all recorded. So you'll have access to all the replays. There's loads of worksheets, there's loads of quizzes. You've got access to the course for the lifetime of the course. I'll run a live round every year. So for the members that join up, there's no extra cost to join all the next live rounds that happen. So you're always a member. And you've got access to a private Facebook community as well as a private community on Kajabi. So there's different ways of being safe, because I know that for everyone, things like Facebook aren't necessarily safe. Things
Right.
like emails aren't necessarily safe. So I have set up other safe spaces in terms of communities. We will talk about cyber safety as well, because there's lots of different things that I know about that. And then there's options for doing just the self-paced course with the live group coaching calls. Plus, there's options of doing adding on one-on-one coaching calls with me and one-on-one distant healing with me as well. So it's going to be a big program. I want people all around the world to be part of this. And I just really want to get this education out there to as many women as I can, because my ultimate goal is, for people to just live the best life they
Mhm.
possibly can, for them to experience the life that I'm living right now in the best relationship that I've ever had with the most amazing guy that I've ever met in my life, who is my absolute best friend. And I want I want to break that cycle of children growing up in these kind of abusive households, so that they can grow up to also live lives where they're in healthy, happy relationships.
I love that. And all of the information will be on the podcast in the bios so that all her freebies are there, all the links, everything you need. She'll send us all the information. But I really feel like maybe in a couple months you should come back and give us an update or,
Oh, I'm
you know,
keen.
yeah.
Definitely
Let's
keen.
not wait a whole year to get you back on here.
No
So
way. Babe, I'll be on every month if you want me
hey,
to.
I'm all for that. I'm all for it. Let's sign you up right now. So I absolutely adore you, Miss Carly, and I am so looking forward to seeing everything that happens and all the lives you're going to change.
Thank you.
So
Such
I so
gorgeous.
appreciate you being here with us today. And thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
for having me.
joining us for another episode of Soul Hygiene. We'll see you later.